Hi, Chris.
Hello, good to see you.
Good to see you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Chris and I thought we'd talk about the early decision process and maybe early programs a little more broadly, since we like these applied learning videos to kind of help you, if you're a student thinking about applying to college, help you kind of think more about your process and get some good advice. If you're a college counselor working with students, we hope this can maybe help you some too. We thought we'd start with introductions though. This is a particularly fun topic for both of us because we've each had experience in the college counseling world. So I know I'm going to put that hat on rather than my admissions hat for a lot of this conversation, and I always enjoy talking with Chris about this kind of thing. My name's Liz. I'm the Director of Undergraduate Admissions here at Northwestern, and sitting next to me.
Hi, folks. I'm Chris Tokuhama, Senior Assistant Director of Admission.
All right. I think Chris is going to kick us off.
Yeah, I mean, and I think your point about kind of like this is a great topic for a lot of different audiences is really, really helpful because I think a lot of times folks think about early decision and there's a lot of different kinds of programs out there, and so we want to take a step back and really kind of put early decision in a little bit of context with other terms you might have heard to help clarify some things. And I think the goal through a lot of these applied learnings is to really help folks feel more confident about the process moving forward. And so kind of understanding the difference between early decision or early action and things like that are kind of where we're going to start to get folks situated. But here on campus, we have what's called early decision. That is a binding commitment, and it is something where folks will turn in an application a little bit early. For us, it's going to be about November 1st, and they'll go back a little bit earlier, usually around mid-December. And early decision is different than early action programs, which is another term that you might hear. Early action has a similar philosophy in that you'll turn in your application a little bit earlier and you'll hear back a little bit earlier. But the important distinction is that it's non-binding. And so that's kind of the main thing to keep in mind between early decision on our campus and early action at other institutions. You might also run into things where they have programs called single choice early action or restrictive early action. And so you just want to be very clear as you're looking into the rounds that you're applying to, what you're signing up for, when the deadlines are, and things like that. Most schools, in addition to those early programs, will also have a regular decision deadline. This is what you probably think of if you just generally think about college admission. For most schools, the application deadlines are going to be after the new year starts. So for us, it's going to be on January 3rd, 2024 this year. And students who turn in their application through the regular decision round will hear back typically in mid to late May, or March, excuse me, not May, too late.
That would give us a lot more time to read applications. So.
I wish, yeah. So mid to late March is when you'll hear back, and typically what will happen is that students will receive their decision and then have until May 1st to kind of make their commitment to a school through the regular process. So that's kind of the overarching kind of timeline for a lot of folks with those programs. The one recommendation, and this comes from the college counseling side, I think, is that I think with a lot of these different deadlines, different requirements, we really encourage folks to get as organized as possible. Whatever system works well for you. If it's an Excel sheet, if it's getting a large paper calendar and writing dates on there, I think the only thing to kind of keep in mind is that all of us have slightly different deadlines, perhaps, and with the different types of rounds or different types of applications, it's just important to make sure that you know where things are going and where they need to be at a particular time. But with that, in terms of thinking about us in early process, I think one of the questions that we often get from students is, why would I apply early versus regular, and what's the difference there? I understand that there's a technical difference, but philosophically or sort of in terms of admission, why might I choose one over the other? And so I'll
Yeah, and with all these early deadlines swimming around, I think this why question changes for students. For the early action programs where you can apply early, and if you get in early, you're not making a commitment necessarily to attend. You have until that regular decision deadline. Maybe you'll gain admission to several other institutions. You can visit schools. You can still take until May 1st to reply even to that early action admission offer usually. Same is the case with these restrictive early action programs that Chris mentioned. So just a handful of schools with single choice or restrictive early action, but kind of a combination, a kind of high, mama bear option between early action and early decision, where you can early action typically you can apply to more than one early action program because you're not making that binding commitment. Single choice or restrictive early action is such that you are saying, I'm only applying to this program, early. I'm not going to apply to another early action program. I'm not applying to an early decision program. But if you get in, it's non-binding. You do have the opportunity to apply to other programs through the regular decision round. But you are kind of placing that chip with that early single choice early action program. And then early decision is such that, as Chris said, you are making that commitment. So why would you apply to early decision? Well, first of all, if you are making that commitment, with early decision, that means if you're admitted, you're not applying to anywhere else during the regular decision round. You're done. You've got your college admission in hand. You've already kind of done the reflection to know that you're going to be really excited to land on that college campus the next fall. And you can kind of kiss the college application process goodbye. So for students, when we talk about, for whom is early decision the right option with that binding commitment, there's a lot of, I don't usually like to go down the route of do's and don'ts or kind of what not to do, but I really do feel compelled to get on a soapbox for a second and comment on this marriage analogy that floats around out there. There are some people who are like, your early decision school is like finding a spouse, and like it has to be the top of your list, and it has to be that you've fallen 100% in love, and like this is your soulmate, right? I don't know, maybe we could get into a long conversation about whether soulmates exist. But it does put a lot of pressure on the decision, and I think undue pressure. There are going to be a lot of great college choices out there. If you're completely excited about a college that has an early decision option, and you've had conversation with your family members and perhaps a college counselor at your high school or a CBO that you're working with, and you decide that this is a good fit school for you and early decision is going to make sense, and you feel confident that you're going to feel excited when you get that acceptance letter and excited to be on campus the following fall, that's a good time to say maybe early decision is a good option for me. And financial considerations are going to be part of that conversation in terms of whether it's a good fit, and Chris and I will get to that. But I do like to take the pressure off of like it has to be at the top of your list. You may have 5 schools at the top of your list that make you equally excited, and one of them's going to be a more appropriate or realistic or just kind of, I don't know, sound, maybe financially sound or whatever, geographically sensible early decision option for you. So I do like to take the pressure off that piece a little, but you better feel good about that school. I think that's rule number 1. You're going to go if you get in. That binding piece is something that we take seriously and something that we ask students to take seriously, and your counselor will sign an agreement and your parent or guardian will sign an agreement. So that's the time to think, I'm really excited about a school. They have the early decision option. I know I'd like to have this process over sooner and that I'll feel good when I get that early decision, admit decision, if that's what's coming my way in mid-December. For us, the other 2 decisions you might get in mid-December with an early decision application is you may be admitted, you may be denied admission, which means you cannot reapply for admission in the same cycle. And you may be deferred, which means your application's going to roll over into the regular decision pool and be reconsidered in that larger pool-wide context. Certain schools sort of have different practices around deferring students in their early pool. There are schools that will defer students into that regular decision round kind of as a rule. It's just honestly within that school's enrollment management approach in that school's best interest to be deferring that many students. And in the student's best interest as well. There are schools that say we really don't defer anyone at all. We like to give a final decision early. We're kind of in the middle. We do our best to give a final decision whenever we feel confident about that final decision. But honestly, our early decision pool has been growing stronger and larger each year, and we are in a position where we defer incredible students in early decision over to the regular decision pool. We deny incredible students in our early decision pool. So those are the 3 decisions that you might get. I want to talk a little bit about the kind of question around, is it easier to get in early? That's a crass way to put it, but I think that's how the question floats around, and we'll address that. But I want to pause because I just talked for a long time, and I want to ask Chris if there's anything he would want to kind of add or put differently.
No, I mean, I think that kind of pushing it back against the marriage analogy, and I was like, I don't know.
You were like, where is she going with this?
No, I've totally heard that before.
We did not
I just
script this
I
ahead of
was
time.
like, oh, I didn't hear it. I didn't consciously think about it set up in that way.
Yeah.
But I think the question that I often ask students, who in that same boat to kind of get that same idea is, if you applied to Northwestern early and were admitted and you came to campus, would you have any regrets?
Yeah.
About applying elsewhere, about seeing where you got in, about, having a bigger understanding of a financial aid picture, things like that. And if you can honestly say no, then I think that, that's the indicator, and really sort of helping students to see that it's not that we have to be your first choice or the only school that you've ever wanted to attend. If that's the case, we love you. We love enthusiasm. But, I think that the idea there is that you're sort of making a commitment to a school early on, and we want you to feel good about that, from our end. And as a family, you're also making that decision together. And so have that conversation with your family about sort of the financial picture and things like that, because we don't want folks to kind of just be admitted and then not be able to pay for college for the next 4 years. That doesn't serve anyone, particularly well. And so you're kind of committing early to that process, and there's some, excitement to that, I think, as Liz mentioned, where you're kind of done by December. And I've certainly had friends in high school who had gotten early to places, and they were just not senioritis. We definitely don't promote that, but they were kind of, there's a little bit of relief there where they're like, I understand where I'm going. I can sort of make plans for the fall, and I'm like, kind of moving along through this process as I go about my senior year, which is already sometimes chaotic and stressful. And so they had that little bit of assuredness, which was great for them. So it's certainly a thing where if you feel confident in your choice to come to campus, we would love to see your applications. And I think, as Liz mentioned, part of the challenge is that we're seeing such an incredible strength of folks in the early pool. And so with that, the only other thing that I would mention is, if you choose to apply early and you end up getting a denial from us, it's not a reflection on you as, someone who is not worthy of attending Northwestern, or it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It simply means that we're a fairly competitive place, and unfortunately we just have a lot of folks who are, just rock stars in their high schools, in their communities, and we have, a limited space in the class. But, I think that we still want to encourage folks to think very carefully about putting your best foot forward in terms of applying to the school. And, if you think about kind of who you are coming to the institution and you can really envision yourself on campus, we would love to read your app in early.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's this strategic elephant in the room, right? I think if for folks who want to take the matter of strategy entirely out of the conversation around early decision, I'll level with our audiences, right? I think you can't, right? If students want to place, it is placing a chip. It is about where you want to go to college. You have to be able to picture yourself there. It has to be a place you're excited about. But again, there is a sense of like, what's going to be a good fit for me, early decision, and is it going to play out well? Is it likely to play out well? So the question around, is it easier to get in early decision? I think I do like to kind of pull the rug out from under that question a little bit. If you look purely at the statistics, and I can share some of Northwestern's statistics, and you can look at similar statistics or just look into the statistics elsewhere you may be considering. Let's see, I should have checked this figure before we got on this video recording, but I think we received somewhere just over 5,000 early decision applications last year. We admit about half of our incoming first year class through early decision, so that's around 1,000 students. Our overall admit rate is around 7%. So if you look at the raw numbers, you're going to come away from that with a sense of there being a real statistical advantage to applying early decision. There are certainly more spots in the class available when we start to review our early decision pool. That said, that pool is very highly concentrated with students who have zeroed in on exactly why Northwestern's a good fit for them. It is a very strong group of applicants, academically competitive group of applicants, and I think that's worth keeping in mind as you think about the statistics. I think there's more to the story than the raw numbers would tell you, And I think that how I like to put it for students who are thinking about early decision versus regular decision, if you get to the point where we do admit about half of our incoming class early, and that's not unusual among our peer set, although it's worthwhile to kind of ask the question of the different schools you're looking at. Once you get to regular decision, we've filled half of our incoming class, and the number of applications we get in regular decision is quite a bit higher than the number we get in early decision. And so how I try to characterize it for students at this point, given the strength that we're seeing in our early decision pools in recent years, is that regular decision admits look just like early decision admits in terms of the strength of those candidates and the academic profiles of those candidates. We just have to say no to a lot more of them in regular decision, a lot more of them, because of just the nature of our process. So we're saying no to rock stars in both rounds, unfortunately. We're saying yes to lots of rock stars in both rounds, but it just plays out where the volume is just higher in regular decision, and the squeeze on the number of spots we're able to allocate is more extreme. So that's the kind of numbers piece. Anything that I'm leaving out in terms of the kind of myths that we'd want to bust around?
Yeah, I mean, I think the fallacy that I often see from students is that they think, by virtue of applying early, that somehow grants them an advantage. And I sort of want to walk them back a little bit to your point and say it's by, the nature of the student who tends to apply early in the first place, they would have been competitive if they applied early, if they applied regular. And so the choice to apply early was not sort of the thing in itself. It was the person who kind of was there at that point to be able to make that decision. And, I think also the thing to reinforce for me anyway is to kind of tell students, like, it's totally fine to apply regular decision as well. If, you're still deciding whether Northwestern is a fit for you, which is totally understandable as a 17-year-old high school senior. We don't necessarily expect that everyone around the world has figured out exactly where they want to go by November 1st and is able to turn in an application. And so we definitely want to encourage folks to take the time that you need. And if you happen to be in a position where you've decided that Northwestern is a place and you want to apply early, then great. But there is no pressure, I think, from our end to a large degree to have to make up your mind and try to rush you along that decision, because I think that a lot of growth happens in senior year, right? As students take classes, have experiences, and it could be that your priorities shift over the fall as well, or the school that you thought was your number one choice might end up kind of falling somewhere else, and you might discover another school, or you might fall in love with Northwestern, or what the case may be. And so being open to kind of that movement and not just being locked in and say, I have to apply ED, that's all I'm going to think about.
Yeah, I think that's true too. And I think it sometimes depends on your high school setting. Some of you may be in high schools where no one's applying early decision. That conversation's just not happening. And then I have a feeling that those of you who have come to this video, to listen to this video, may be in high schools where early decision feels like an inevitability, and you're kind of thinking to yourself, it doesn't feel right for me, but everyone around me is talking about it. And I think it is important to reassure folks that we read a lot more applications in our regular decision round. The majority of our applicants, as much as we're trying to focus on ED here, the majority of our applicants choose to apply regular decision, and we admit more students in our regular decision round. Even though we admit about half the class in early, we can't expect all of our regular decision admits to say yes to us as much as we would love that. So we will admit more than that second half of the class in regular decision. Let's move on, I think, to the financial aid piece, because it's a really important piece of this for us. We know that making that commitment is also making a commitment to paying for college, and that's a broader conversation with your family, and it's an area where I think we feel good about what we can offer students in terms of the confidence to step forward regardless of their financial circumstances with an early decision commitment. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris, but that was a long segue.
No, that's great.
But one that I care a lot about making the right way.
It's planting seeds for future stuff. And I think the important thing, or one of the important things to know about a process for us, is that there really is not a difference in financial aid between early decision and regular decision. And so if you are thinking about it, in terms of the package that you receive from us, it's going to be the same. We are very much need-based in our approach, and so provided that your family circumstances don't change between the time that you applied ED and would have applied RD, your financial aid package is going to be exactly the same. But certainly, I think, I was going to put a quick shout out. If you have specific questions about that that you're trying to sort out prior to applying, certainly reach out to folks on our campus. If you have questions about multiple students in college, if you have questions about kind of disruption of income for that sort of thing. Because I think, as Liz mentioned, our goal is to make sure that you successfully graduate from Northwestern. And part of that is being able to afford college tuition for your family for the next 4 years. It's not just about getting in, although a lot of folks focus on the acceptance letter of ED or things like that. We want to make sure that you're able to persist in college, and being able to kind of map that out in terms of your family's finances are really important, I think. And with early decision, one of the kind of drawbacks potentially is that you're not going to get the chance to compare financial aid offers, which is definitely something that will happen in regular. So kind of, I know we're at a little bit of a broken record, but it really is a case where if you're applying early, we want to make sure that your entire family is on board with kind of what you're getting into and what you're signing up for, because of that component where there is a binding commitment, and so you're kind of locking yourself into this. And my worst fear is that students don't really have the conversation with parents, which I get can be awkward sometimes, but don't really have the conversation about family finances, what our budget is, what do I need a part-time job to help support this kind of endeavor, things like that. Before going in, and then it all sort of comes to a head in April, and then now we have to have the conversation for the first time. Now we're under pressure, and so that's the sort of thing where I especially if you're applying early, have that conversation sooner rather than later. And I think to help jumpstart that, we certainly have tools on our website. There's also tools available from the College Board. The primary two are going to be things like your EFC calculator, Estimated Family Contribution Calculator. That'll give you sort of a ballpark figure of what you might expect to pay at college. It takes a little bit of time, so kind of just prepare for it. And most likely, if you are a student, you're going to need your parents' help to fill out that information. But it will really give you a good sort of insight into, I think, what is going to be kind of in the ballpark for Northwestern. Because our financial aid process is need-based, or it's driven by need, it will be fairly similar, roughly speaking. I mean, it's not, you can't quote it, but it is going to give you a very close number to what you could expect. If you're looking for something faster, though, and this is the thing that I recommend that all families do, regardless of if they're applying for financial aid or not. I think we did it when it first came out, but there's a tuition estimator on our website as well called My Intuition. It literally takes, I want to say, 5 to 6 minutes. I mean, it's very quick, it's very easy, and it doesn't really require you to have any copies of like your taxes or assets. It really just asks kind of very broad questions about your family circumstances, and it's not as accurate because of that, but it still is very good about giving you a range that you might think about paying for college. And it's just a great conversation starter I have found with families in the past, where they found, oh, I didn't really think about that, or I didn't think about in my head kind of what that meant for our family year to year to be able to kind of carve out that amount of money in our budget. And so if nothing else, it's really a quick way to kind of start that conversation and get it going. But I think as Liz was saying, the financial piece is really important to us, because we want to make sure that you feel comfortable going into that process. It's, again, all kind of this idea of going in eyes open about what you're doing. And I think the other thing with that, as Liz will talk about, is, if the financial circumstances don't work out for some reason, there is a little bit of kind of wiggle room that we can have.
Yeah. And I think, but before I talk about that wiggle room piece, I do want to just call out this year specifically. Chris referenced the EFC, which is great. That's Estimated Family Contribution. It's a great hook for me to hang my hat on here as I address the FAFSA changes that we're seeing. So the FAFSA is changing, and we're going to be kind of transitioning from thinking about that estimated family contribution to thinking about a student aid index, which is really the same number of what your family can reasonably be expected to pay in a given year. And the net price calculator that you'll find on our website, I believe you'll see student aid index instead of EFC. So just know it may take some of us longtime admissions folks a while to switch gears on that acronym, but we're there for you. The other piece that I want to point out, we're a school that meets 100% of demonstrated financial need for all of our admitted students. So that's something you can trust in when you're applying early decision. And to Chris's point, these calculators can be an outstanding way for you to get a sense of whether you might qualify for that need-based aid. and what that level of need-based aid might look like for your family. Northwestern is often much more affordable than families imagine. So please do engage with those calculator tools. The other piece with the FAFSA changes this year, and this is very particular to this year and early decision, is that the FAFSA is not likely to be available until at least sometime in December, maybe January. So students who are applying for early decision and applying for financial aid, we also require something called the CSS profile. It's a tool that allows us to use an institutional methodology rather than a federal methodology for determining financial aid awards. And we're feeling pretty confident that we will be able to use the information in that CSS profile and your family tax information to generate financial aid awards for our early decision admits at the time we tell them that they are admitted. So as long as you get that CSS profile in, we know your FAFSA will come later, and as long as your FAFSA reflects the same information that your profile did, then our early decision financial aid awards should stand. So we don't expect any hiccups given that FAFSA delay, but I know it's a big part of the conversation right now. The other piece that I wanted to talk about with regard to finances is that if you have done all of this kind of reflection and talking with your family and you feel confident about the finances and you've used the calculators and you've kind of taken a look at what need-based aid means for your family, and you do get admitted to Northwestern and the financial aid award just doesn't align with what your expectations were, or maybe you didn't have the full conversation you needed to have, and your family takes a look at things and says this just isn't a financially tenable situation for us, we can't make this happen. First of all, you should check in with our financial aid folks. We have a process where you can kind of submit more information if maybe something was left out or maybe something happened between the time you submitted those initial financial aid materials and when you received your admission decision. So always please check in and see if there are adjustments that can be made based on new information to your financial aid award. But if there simply is nothing that can change or be adjusted based on the information available, we do have a way to release students from that binding early decision commitment. Our early decision deposit deadline, students tell us that they're coming for sure February 1st. That does allow us to thoughtfully allocate spots in our regular decision process, which, as we already touched on, I don't want to harp on it too much, but are limited. So we ask that our early decision admits do kind of make that firm commitment with, by February 1st, and that does allow some time for the incredibly small number of students, I have to say. Very, very few. I've had to sort of approve these releases in very few numbers over the years. But if a student does right and our financial aid folks are saying, yeah, there's really nothing more we can do given our need-based policies, we can release a student from that binding ED commitment. And to the extent that plays out within that timeline leading up to February 1st, that really does put everyone in a better position to be moving ahead with the regular decision process. I think that was and that's not always like advertised or known, but it is a kind of asterisk or small print that I think most schools would allow for with a binding early decision program. Where were we going to go next? I think we were more or less going to kind of wrap things up.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if I could have just put in a plug really quickly, too. There's some language in a document put out by this national organization that we all belong to as institutions, the National Association for College Admission Counseling, that has some guidance about best practices. So most schools will probably have some sort of language in their early decision agreement that kind of lets you know that you might be removed from this process if the finances don't work out. And it's really a great thing to look at and kind of confirm before you sign that document as a student, as a parent, and your counselor will also sign that as well. But just to confirm that, I think is really, really helpful. It's something that's minor, but it can be very, very important for students. And I think the other thing with that as well, when we're thinking about kind of paying for college, oftentimes when we have a discussion with families at this point in time, it's helpful to have the discussion discussion about what your family can afford and what your family is kind of reporting on something like an SII, and those might not always be in alignment with each other, where you can say like, oh, maybe we could technically afford to pay this amount, but maybe comfortably we would be willing to pay only this amount. And so to have that sort of conversation with your family beforehand is incredibly helpful. And I think the other thing, in terms of kind of wrapping up, what we really hope for students is that they, again, feel comfortable moving forward in this process. And part of it is, I think, students feel anxious sometimes about making this commitment or kind of jumping in and to help that, we have a lot of resources on our website or kind of online programming that we're putting in terms of trying to get a sense from a student perspective what it meant to apply ED, what that was like for them. And so on our YouTube channel, for example, we have student panels or recordings of student panels where students who applied ED kind of talk about their process, what their thoughts were, perhaps share some of their own kind of best practices or anxieties or their excitement of why they decided to apply ED in the first place. So it can be a really great resource, I think, for students who are more on the fence in terms of understanding why you might want to apply ED or even how to go about that process. And then the other thing to kind of plug as well, since we're here, we have a set of programs under this umbrella of Purple Preview, which again is just designed as a resource for students to get to know more about the school or feel more comfortable about the process. But we have an on-campus version and also a version that's virtual or online. But basically the idea is that you get a chance to interact with a current undergraduate student. And so if you're thinking about applying early and you have the time or you're going to be in the area, I would very much promote the on-campus Purple Preview version because you're going to get a chance to shadow an undergraduate and really sort of feel if that's right for you, I think is a great kind of opportunity. I recognize travel and time out of school and all that sort of stuff, but if you're able to, it's certainly a great kind of thing that can maybe might help you make up your mind. But we also have kind of Zoom call versions of that program where you're going to get a chance to talk to an undergraduate student. So you can sort of ask them more questions about student life and sort of help feel that this is what the right choice is for you. And we kind of talked about that at the beginning, but certainly check those out. Those are available on our website or the YouTube channel for Northwestern Admission.
Yeah, I think our digital programming, we've got live shot tours, we've got these conversations, we've got panels, with campus partners. There are so many ways, I think, making that ED commitment. It used to be, I'd hear from students, I can't make it because I can't visit campus and it costs too much or it's too far, and we get that. But we have seen more and more students applying early decision, having never visited campus in recent years, thanks to all of the different avenues that have been opened up by these digital programs, and that's really encouraging for me. I also just wanted to, before we sign off, if there are any students who are participating in the QuestBridge program, listening on the call, this is a program for students who are kind of self-identifying as low-income students and working with QuestBridge as a partner organization to many colleges that offer that care a lot about affordability and offer really generous financial aid. There's a process called the National Match Process through QuestBridge, where students are designated finalists through QuestBridge and then kind of rank those partner colleges and are considered for this National Match Scholarship. That's also going to be, in most cases, a binding commitment. So we are a QuestBridge partner school. We always have a really large number of QuestBridge students on our campus. We're one of the largest Quest networks of the partner schools, maybe 400 or more Quest scholars on our campus at any given time. Across class years. And so that national match process includes a cohort of QuestBridge students who are kind of admitted with our early decision cohort, but it's distinct from our early decision application. And then for students who are finalists who don't match with Northwestern, we are a school that then invites students who didn't match to convert their application to early decision if they choose. So then we always kind of have additional QuestBridge students in our early decision cohort and our regular decision cohort as well. But I just wanted to call that out. I think we talked longer than we thought we might. This is obviously a rich topic, and I think both one with a lot of logistics and a lot of emotion attached to it. And I think we're trying to find the balance to give you all the information and the acknowledgement you need on both fronts. Because for the students where Northwestern just is the school you want to be at, and that's where you're coming from with ED, whether or not you can be released from the agreement because of finances, that the disappointment there is still going to be acute, and we see that and we recognize that. So it's an emotional topic, but it's also one, to Chris's point, I don't know how many minutes ago, make some spreadsheets, stay organized. This is a complex process, and again, one that's emotional and also logistically challenging for all of you. So we appreciate however long you've watched this video today. We hope you've found something useful. Maybe we'll see your early decision application. Maybe we'll see your regular decision application. But we hope that you have a wonderful school year, regardless. If you're one of our college counseling partners, we wish you a great school year as well, and thanks for your partnership in supporting students. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.